3, 2, 1. Ready?
Hi, my name is Emma. I am the Director of Business Development at Vector.
And I'm Eric. I'm one of the co-founders at an early stage venture capital firm called Hustle Fund.
I'm super excited to have you here with me today. We're going to be talking all things fund admin, your experience transitioning fund admins, and we're going to have some pretty awesome questions to go through today.
I'm excited.
What made you decide to look for a fund administrator in the first place versus hiring in-house?
Yeah, so I'm an emerging manager. Hustle Fund is less than 6 years old. And for most emerging managers, the vast majority, I think they are better served working with a partner for fund administration. And there's a practical reason behind it. Usually when you're getting started, the assets under management that you're managing as a new manager are relatively low. So fund administration, especially a very high-end fund administration, is an expensive role. It takes a lot of skill. It takes a lot of meticulous character to succeed in it. And we find that the talent is a little bit better by working with a partner. And I'm delighted to say that we have absolutely found it in Vector.
So, what were some key factors you were looking for when searching for a fund admin?
Well, the reality is that we had gone through a number of fund admins. In fact, Vector was our fourth fund admin that we decided to work with. And maybe I can sort of talk about what didn't work. So when it came to fund administration, the role I think has to come down to a few things. One is great communication between the fund admin team and the core management team. The second is a highly, highly meticulous and thorough character where you want perfection down to the smallest cent, because these things really matter when a fund admin is managing the cash flow of much of your business. And we found that just those two things alone were really difficult to find in our previous fund admins. We had good fund admins before, but we also had some really bad ones within the same team even. There was a lot of inconsistency with some of these legacy firms in terms of the quality of some of the points of contacts that we were assigned to. And there was a little bit of rotation there. And when we had a chance to get to know the Vector team from top to bottom, from our primary point of contact all the way through the CEO of the business, and we got to meet much of the team over the months that we were trying to consider a different partner, it was a really clear choice that Vector was going to be the best team for us to work with. And that's proven to be true. As of this recording, it's been about 6 months into our relationship. But already we are finding that this is a team that we want to grow old with. And we're excited to spend the next several years growing our businesses together.
How did you go about researching and evaluating when choosing the fund admin?
So finding fund administration in the VC space is a little bit tricky just because I think it's very heavily reliant on good referrals. But there's also a second thing that's really problematic here. As an emerging manager, you often don't know what good looks like. So asking the right kind of questions is tough. To arrive to Vector, it really did come down to asking some of the service partners that we really cared about and trusted their opinions. I believe the way that we found our way into your team was through our auditors or possibly our tax team. And that's often how these kinds of relationships begin, is through a trusted third party that you care about their opinion and then kind of leads you to the space. And that's something I don't really like about fund admin as an industry here in venture, because it's a little bit opaque to figure out who's good. In fact, this is a really good analogy to venture in general. I mean, in venture capital, every VC says that they want to be the first check-in and that they're founder-friendly and so forth. But the reality for founders is that there's heavy variance. And it's exactly like that when it comes to selecting your service partners. So we came in through a warm inbound. I'm hoping that through this kind of video, it provides managers who do not possess those kinds of connections to realize how great your team is, even without the warm introduction as well. And from that, we started interviewing the team top to bottom. Again, like it kind of began with meeting the C-level suite team, getting to know you, Emma, and your colleague, Margot, as well as interviewing some potential points of contacts on the fund administration side, the actual controller side of it. And once we went through our rounds of conversations and actually had our team that would be interfacing with your team pretty heavily speak to one another, we reviewed our notes. We did this with actually several fund administrators at once, but it was a clear winner to select the Vector team.
Very excited by the way that turned out.
Yeah, me too. And actually, frankly, quite relieved because it was an emotionally difficult past several years. It's really difficult to find, I think, a great service partner forever. But one thing I think that we wanted to set as a clear social contract, and this is actually something I challenge managers who are looking at this video today, is not to actually view the relationship with your fund admin or even your auditor or tax people as service partners. It's always a bad relationship if you're like, you owe me this because I'm paying you this. And like that's actually a really transactional view. One thing that really was exciting for me personally, and I think I speak for our entire Health Fund team when we worked with Vector, is how we set that social contract to view this as a true partnership. One where we can, of course, share feedback to you, but your team has also been really explicit in sharing feedback back to us so that our partnership can strengthen over time. And that alignment, I think, has been tremendous for us because it shows that we're adaptable, willing to grow together. And I got to say, Emma, that isn't true for a lot of fund admins that we speak to who want maybe more distance, a little bit more of that transactional quality. And I find that to be a little bit less joyful in terms of the daily experience.
Thank you so much for sharing that experience. This has been really great to hear, and we are so happy to be able to support you and glad that you found a home with us here at Vector. So, what were some challenges that you faced during the search process?
I think the biggest challenge was down to two things, actually. The first was trying to understand who was actually good. And then the second came down to pricing. So on the actually good part of it, it's very difficult to understand the perfect model of what a great fund admin should look like. Yes, there should be great responsiveness. Yes, there should be a meticulous nature and so forth. But time is a heck of a thing here too. We want to get a sense of whether the person that we're assigned to now is going to then change over to a different team, then a different team, then a different team over time. And what we found from a couple of different models of fund admin that we directly experienced was we didn't want to work with this firm that felt like they could abstract away the need for the real human relationships between the fund admins and ourselves. Some fund administration teams actually take the approach of just, you should be as self-serve as much as possible, or these points of contact, they're going to be rotating all the time because people quit and it's totally fine. What we find is that is not fine at all. We think that it is really important for us to build a relationship with you, Emma, with Molly, the CEO, with Jason, our point of contact, and actually get to know each other and understand each other's styles because there's so much nuance in each of these businesses that you're actually helping to serve. The Hustle Fund team is really weird, just like any other VC team is going to have their weirdness as well. So it just takes some time, I think, to get a sense of the philosophy behind the funds. And we definitely did not want to work with a larger firm that treated us like a commodity because we are a little bit small potatoes since we're just getting started. And in terms of pricing, there's a lot of variance in terms of how pricing structures are created in fund administration. Some were really dogmatic that this is the price, there's going to be no negotiation, it's a very high premium. But again, it was really difficult to understand what you get with that. With the Vector team, I think you guys have priced yourself really fairly and competitively for the market. And in addition to that, too, exhibited some flexibility and empathy that, as an emerging manager, we have relatively limited budgets in terms of what we can do, but that there would be a path for us to grow together and for this relationship to be really successful together from a monetary perspective on both sides as well. And I really like that. The thing that I really will add also about why Vector was so interesting for us is that I view you as much a startup as we view Hustle Fund as a startup. It's a newer party to the game. The cool thing about this is that the team has so much experience in this arena, but the Vector brand is relatively new. And I loved the scrappiness, the startup mentality that your team possesses because it really does reflect the exact kinds of people that we like to work with within our team, but also the founders that we like to serve as well. So all of those things made it really unique toward Vector. And I got to say that the quality is assorting, who's good for this industry is just always going to be so difficult for us because we don't know how to solve that outside of just taking the time to build a relationship with a prospective partner, and then after some period of time together, having that kind of level of conviction. If you're just going to go off of the materials that you see on the website, or even just a referral, we've had referrals from very trusted parties that ended up being kind of terrible recommendations, because the variance in quality within the teams of some of these other fund admins in this industry are very very wide. One team can have great teams or points of contacts, and then can have really really poor points of contact within the same team. But with Vector, it was very consistent.
It's always great to experience the synergies between both of our firms. I think both of us having that partner mentality and really wanting to grow with each other as partners has just been it's a recipe for success. So you've touched on this before in some of the previous points, but wanted to learn more about your experience working with your previous fund administrators.
So we've had some good moments as well. We started off with a really, really traditional fund administrator for 2 or 3 years at the beginning of the Hustle Fund life. And we were lucky because it was a really high performing team, a smaller boutique firm, but then it got acquired by a larger firm. And that's when we started to find that there is a variance of quality in terms of the new firm's culture. This other firm, which I won't name, is actually quite good. But we just found that transition to be really difficult, and it didn't seem like we were getting the right kind of attention at the time. We then moved on to another fund administrator that is more technology driven in this market. That's at least how they build themselves. And it was an awful experience. This is a firm that had a philosophy of trying to drive more self-service on the part of the fund administrator, or sorry, on the part of the emerging manager. What does that mean? It means that they try to create technology interfaces where the emerging manager was supposed to input much more information about the deals and the cash flow requests and things like that. And the software was quite poor. In addition to that, too, the teams would turn over quite a bit. We had like a new point of contact almost every quarter. They did a terrible job, this other fund administrator, in transitioning the information and nuances about what Health Fund actually does to the new teams. And the quality of the service was really, really bad. And ended up being a pretty urgent situation for us to switch out. And fortunately, the next landing spot that we had was Vector. We were desperate to get out of our previous contract with this large fund administrator. And then we found this team that was, again, like an upstart team, really, really scrappy, had A-level people across the board. And it was really quick for us to make a decision that, if this seems like to be a partner that we'd want to work with for quite some time. And it's played out very well.
I get a lot of questions about transitioning a fund. So from your experience, you have, a number of funds, you have a lot of LPs and a lot of companies. What made you decide that it was worth actually making the transition and spending that time to move to a different fund admin versus just writing it out and staying with your current one?
Yeah. We caught each other, Emma, at a very awkward time. I'd argue actually one of the worst times. So this was right before the Christmas holiday, right after Thanksgiving, where we discovered that we really had to transition out. The service is so poor in the previous firm that we are working with, and they were getting really late when it came to things like quarterly financial statements that were owed to our LPs, or numbers were entirely wrong and misreported, and so forth. So I'd say that the ideal time for us, if we could have planned this transition, would have been after like tax and audit season. But your team was up for the challenge of taking us on right before the end of the year to make this transition happen after you had some context about what we were going through. And we made it happen. That's one thing I really appreciated and will forever be grateful to the Vector team about, is that you caught us at a really strange time of the year before year end and helped us to transition through audit and tax season. It was almost like building the plane as we're flying it, because you also were a critical part of the audit and tax season as you're gathering context about Hustle Fund. So it was not something I would have ever liked. In fact, like when that transition was happening personally in my life, I was also going through COVID, and I was like, oh my gosh, we have to get rid of this previous relationship. Oh my gosh, we got to find like our different relationship here. But your team has been nothing but supportive ever since, and off we go. Some words of wisdom to emerging managers who might be watching this. Of course, you should talk to the Vector team if you're watching this video. But in addition to that, too, the timing does matter. If there's some flexibility to avoid some of the busy seasons, that's actually good for you, too. Even if you're suffering through with a poor fund administrator, it might be to your benefit to just white knuckle through that season. And then in parallel, maybe have conversations with Emma and team to build that relationship and be prepared for a smoother transition late spring through the summer. I think that's going to be ideal for all parties involved. But if you need to make your transition at any time, I think it starts with just having that conversation with Emma and team at Vector at any time of the year, and then maybe figure out what the right transition is going to look like based on your needs.
Are there any particular features or services that you've really enjoyed while working with us versus your previous admin?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. The first is actually the Valence portal. So Valence is sort of the technology interface for our LPs, but also our team to manage a lot of the fund administration communication. So things like capital calls, things like document storage and so forth, tax document distribution. It's a new platform. I know that your team is very busy in shipping new features there, but I've been really impressed by the quality of the product. A little bit of background. So before Hustle Fund, I was a product manager at places like Instagram, Facebook, Intuit. So I can smell a good product, and it's clear to me that your team truly understands the parties involved in this industry because it was quite intuitive to play with these products, and it's only getting better every day. So that's part one, and I really do enjoy that. The other thing that I really appreciate about the Vector team in terms of this relationship are actually the relationships to the human beings themselves. And our closest contacts, I'm going to name them, are Jason and Chelsea. So they have a fantastic attitude, really, really positive people. That's one thing I really like. In addition to that, too, they push back in the right ways. Hustle Fund is a bit of a unique beast in that we have a very high velocity fund investing style. And that's actually probably makes us a bit of a pain in the butt as a client to serve. But, we were able to quickly work through some of the day-to-day administration of this stuff pretty easily by talking about like, well, what if we batch certain wires on certain days? What if we set kind of communication frequencies in other ways? And it felt like even though you're servicing so many emerging managers, we could customize a relationship through pragmatism very easily. And your team is really good about pushing back on us to suggest a better way of working together. And I really like that because I don't think it's a healthy kind of relationship if your service partner is just bending over backwards to just do whatever you say. As a manager, that sounds great, but I'm telling you that that's not a really sustainable relationship. If you want to keep working with the right kinds of people in the long term, you don't want to burn out anyone, right? By just imposing, I think, a style of work that just isn't pragmatic. And I think we're certainly going down the path of just continuously refining a better way of working together. And it's been exciting because it sort of teaches us, how to do our jobs better as well. And no one really teaches you how to become a good emerging manager. So we can always use the lessons wherever they come from.
Yeah, really reiterating on the partnership point, I think that's been a really fantastic piece. And us really being like another internal team member and building out those processes together and the way we do things, I think is really going to be helpful for us building that long-term relationship. What advice would you give to other venture capital firms and other emerging managers who are choosing or considering switching fund admins?
So I'm going to go out and make a somewhat bold statement, which is your fund administrator, that partner that you select, may be the most important partnership that you create. So I don't think that a lot of new managers who are starting their funds from day one think about back office. They want to dream about investing and supporting great founders. And yes, that is a part of the job, but a necessary and very, very big part of the work of being a venture capitalist, especially if you're trying to create a great franchise that's going to last for many years, is making sure that you have excellent infrastructure to support your founders and your team. Your fund administrator is going to be someone that is managing nearly all of the cash flow of your business. These are the wires that go out to your founders. These are the wires that go back to your LPs when you invest and do a great job and send back excellent returns. And in addition to that, too, in some cases, this is something that you can negotiate with Vector and other fund administrators as well. There might be a little bit of cash flow within your management company as well. So this is the team that is moving all of the lifeblood across all of the necessary parties. And you will be speaking to this team all the time. So you want to make sure that this is not a decision that you just gloss over. You just fit in and say like, oh, this person has, or this firm has a great reputation. That's good enough for me. Let's just slot it in, whatever. No, this transition to onboarding a great fund admin, it takes months, right? Refining it, I think, is going to take years, probably forever, for us to like continually improve our processes, especially as new technologies like AI come available that can even augment our work. So you want to find a team that, first of all, fits a personality and attitude that you enjoy. You know, it's a relationship that's more than just like the transaction itself, because I think that really matters in terms of having a lasting years-long partnership. But in addition to that, too, possesses a flexibility so that you can customize the work together. And I want to emphasize, it's not just having Vector or any fund admin conform to your work, but actually those teams also suggesting things back to improve your work as well. Because this stuff is so hard. Getting through tax, getting through audit, getting through your quarterly SOIs, these are not simple things. And it takes a lot of trust and a lot of good communication. But with a scrappy team like Vector that has a little bit more of that startup mentality, I find that there's more hunger for the team to sort of figure out a relationship that works in a faster basis using technology. And it's been really exciting to work with you on that basis. But you know, regardless of whether you choose to work with Vector or not, I think it is such a high bar in terms of what excellence should look like to facilitate your work. You got to proceed really carefully, do your due diligence, don't rush a decision like that, and definitely have Vector on that list as well, because they're worth chatting with.
What has been your favorite thing about getting to know the Vector team and having us be a partner of Hustle Fund?
That's a really easy one. So my favorite thing about the Vector team, what I've learned about them in our relationship, comes down to one word: vibes. Amazing vibes. It's a team that actually has not only just prodigious talent, of course, first and foremost, but also an amazing attitude, right? I mean, scrappy, startup-y, but really, really funny, somewhat irreverent. Talking to your team is very similar to talking to my teammates or some of my friends. It's a group of folks that I think are really invested in the relationship with managers. And I've loved the fact, Emma, that we had a conference just a few days ago where your team was able to show up and represent Vector at our big annual investor conference. And one of my favorite pictures of you was at our photo booth when you wore a giant falcon head as one of the props, and your team was being as silly as we were. Again, like that's sort of just the Hustle Fund style, but I just love the fact that it's just enjoyable spending time together and doing this work together. So, I have a very simple definition of joy that I'm trying to solve for in this life, which is to surround myself with people that I really respect, but have a lot of fun with as well. And in spades, I got to say that the Vector team completely satisfies that criteria. I actually feel very lucky because I even think our tax and audit teams also do that too. But for emerging managers out there, this work is so stressful, right? Just creating something out of nothing, a new brand, is always hard. It's just like what your startup founders are doing. But having the additional benefit of lovely human beings with great vibes who are there with you in the trenches and are also really funny and irreverent as well, I can't say enough and speak enough about how great and safe that feels to possess that. So this is not something that you're going to find in a lot of teams, but you certainly will find it with Vector team, and I'm grateful for it.
Any last words, Eric?
Yeah, I think my final thing that I'd like to say to you, Emma, and I actually relayed this to the entire Vector team, is thank you so much for saying yes to Hustle Fund. You know, we're not an easy team to work with. For those of you who never have heard of Hustle Fund, we're investing in 84 companies per year, right? That's a very high velocity team. We are a team of 35 people with relatively small assets under management. So it's kind of reasonable when I meet with a partner like yourself who are just like, you guys seem cool, but it's going to be really difficult to work with you. What I really appreciated about the Vector team is that you're up for the challenge of saying, like, this is weird. It will be probably a tougher client than we're used to, but we're okay with that. Let's see what we can do to make this happen. And I will always be grateful for that, for the Vector team of saying yes to us, because not every fund administrator has said yes to us. We have met teams who, for the exact same reasons, you're too complicated, it's a little bit too big of a portfolio, have said no to us. And I thought that was reasonable too. So I just love to meet teams and work with founders just like yourselves that are not afraid to look at a massive, massive challenge and say, I think there's a way for us to solve this together. And that's exactly what the Vector team does. And I know, Emma, that we're going to have a long, many years long relationship of building our firms together as great partners. And I'm really excited by the prospect of emerging managers who may be watching this video as well. And hopefully convincing them that they can also build an awesome partnership with the Vector team and be as satisfied as we are at Hustle Fund and working with you. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Eric, for spending the time talking with me, all things fund admin, and we'll chat soon.